think there's a clear value add that most people don't talk about, which is operation people and legal operations specifically are actually more like a product people than they might have see themselves as, and a lot of the things that they end up being responsible for is really the ability to come and bring to life processes and the way legal serves the business in a better way, right? And so when you think about what is that role, in many ways it is a product role. It's you need to you understand your audience and your customers, if you will. You need to be able to look at what are the things that they value, and what are the things that are easy for them to do, what are the things that are hard for them to do, what is the different ROI that is really involved in each of the personal stakeholders that are involved, whether it's the legal team or their counterparts that use their services, and really think about what are the solutions from policies to technology to just process, and own that, just like a product person owning it. So I think this is just an interesting angle. For my, I'm not a practitioner, right? But for my angle, this is kind of where a lot of times when I talk, it sounds like I'm talking to product people, but at the same time, they're not always look at themselves as one. So I thought it's a good place to kind of put that point in a lot of people's head, and really kind of think through that when they look at their projects and challenges.
So Raj, I'm going to go to you, and Kimberly, you in the chat for now. You can answer the same question. So Raj, what is the role of legal ops in leading process improvement between legal and the business from your perspective?
Sure. So if I reflect back a decade or two ago, the function of legal ops was primarily focused on administrative tasks, right? And that included like CLE training, coordinating events, or just running day-to-day activities to support the legal staff. That has changed over time. I think especially in the last decade or in the last 5 years, the function of legal ops has now evolved as well. It's now focused on not just CLE trainings and all these day-to-day administrative functions, but it's also evolved into spend management. It has also evolved into driving process changes, and that can be either you leverage technology or infrastructure, or just looking at how do you automate process, and it can be purely by just revisiting the processes or coming up with processes that didn't exist before, right? So we've seen that evolution over time, and now I anticipate that will continue to change as we move forward with the advent of new technologies, that there's going to be a greater focus on looking at tech in conjunction with the process as we move forward.
This one to you, Raj. Like, how does legal ops market automation as a value add both to legal and to the business? And then how do you achieve buy-in?
So how does legal educate? Or how does legal market? I think, the way I've done it is I have actually spent time educating my legal teams as to what are the benefits of automation, right? And it can be something very simple. It can be, from their perspective, automation to them is looking at something quickly, right? It doesn't necessarily have to require moving a piece of data from point A to point B. So when I look at automation for them, I say, okay, here's a report. Today, you can just go click on a URL, click on a link, and a report comes up. It's a quick way of automating how you look at data or how you render data. Then we also look at how do we actually transact when you have a request that comes in and it flows through the right appropriate steps, then the right people before there's an outcome to it. We look at that as automation as well. So how I've done is I've looked at opportunities where you can identify quick wins that are potentially have impact, right? And actually solves a problem that is immediate to them, right? So reporting for me is one example in my current role. I've taken this opportunity to move them away from spreadsheets or Excel to hear something that we put together a a quick database. We had the information come in, and then we just applied some reporting on top of it that they can now run at any instance of time whenever they want to as well. And then we also showed them that, look, you can also actually dive or mine into that data. So you can click on certain attributes and you can look at the data in more details as well. So I think part of the exercise goes into educating to legal, what does automation mean? It doesn't necessarily have to require technology, but it can also be just process refinement and making things more efficient as a whole. Can you guys all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Raj.
Okay.
How you finished? So Siggy, you're seeing it from a totally different perspective, right? Like you're seeing more use cases across the board. Like how does a legal operations person achieve buy-in from their team, from when they're like just looking at the product to kind of bringing it on board?
You got cut out a little bit, but I think I got the question. You're right. It is from a different angle. I think it's interesting. I think it actually comes in. I can think about it from two different points. One, if kind of to connect to Rajan's point, I do think that being able to have quick wins and simplify the value. So instead of like trying to train the rest of the people around you of what you're trying to achieve, from like soup to nuts, it really like thinking about like what are the different value that I can give quickly, so people are opened up to this. Because I think I don't think it's gonna be controversial to say that the sort of the biggest barrier of innovation is change, right? And like the people are just always gonna be pushed back on change, and so the real question is how do you bring about that change, step by step, by providing value in each of those steps, and that allows that openness into like, oh, that's actually is not change for the sake of change. It is it is a progress, and it's a better experience. So I think for us, what we've seen is it is come back to my point about the being a product manager, right? But a little bit, but it's like, what do they care about most? What are the things that need to change? What are the things that should not change? Or I should say, are not a must-have to change in order to get the value? Can we go around them? Can we leverage technology in order to bridge the gap? Right. I think that the biggest thing we've seen with legal operations working for with the legal team is most folks in the legal team doesn't want to change their Outlook and email as the first place, or Microsoft Office and so on, but they do want to get that value add, right? So can you wrap that around, right? Can you make that link to the report you mentioned, Rajan? Can you make that as a natural pace of their day-to-day routine versus the need for training? It's almost like if you feel like you need to train people, you need to take half a step back and ask, okay, do we actually need to train them on this though, or is that a way to make it more ingrained in their current process? Sometimes process is just bad process needs to change, right? Let's make it very clear, right? You shouldn't beautify a bad process, but not all parts of a process need to change. I think this is different. That was not the case like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think there's a lot of new technology, but also, I think just best practices that really kind of ask that question: what in this process is broken? Let's kind of agile approach to it, iterate on it, start with small value and increase it over time, versus something that rip and replace we all got used to, which is like, oh, this is bad, let's just replace everything, retrain everyone on everything, and then kind of get some value in 2.5 years. By the way, by then the process is already, the requirements are already different than when we started the project. So this is very common in legal, but also across other departments we work with. That it's just a human thing, honestly, more than anything else.
And
So,
so
so
get to
it's
your point. Sorry, can I just say something, Colin? Can I add to that? So get to your point. I think some of the problems we run into in legal are not just legal specific; they're actually across multiple business units, and we'll be surprised that when you look at some of those things, we think, oh, legal is maybe not as forward looking as other business units, but actually we've actually run into instances, even HR or other business units, where they are just running reports on spreadsheets, just like we are in legal, or they're doing some things that are very manual as well. So it's interesting to see that legal is not the only team or only department that is not up to date necessarily.
Yeah, honestly, far from it. I don't know if it makes people feel better or worse. You can be the judge, but it is incredible how legal, procurement, finance in general, by the way, HR, IT, and even sales and dev and engineering, but
Mhm.
obviously sales and engineering are maybe like slightly the outlier. Literally everyone else are having the exact same issues, you know. But just like people are not following the process and not you know going through the forms or the requirements you put in legal. Show me one sales manager that is not bugging their salespeople to fill Salesforce still to
Mhm.
this day. So it's really just like that same gap in sort of like personal ROI is so common. I actually think legal, both from a community and sort of like um, priority, have actually grown one of the fastest as I've seen grown in the last 10 years from our end. Definitely faster than HR, for example. But I think where there's still work to be done is being able to justify and sort of like sell internally. Because back to your point, calling or marketing it to the business, right? So being able to sell that value across, and something actually good discussion I had in the event in Santa Barbara was around, how do you even define the value, of better, legal process, for example, right? And a small example is, instead of talking about turnaround time or the effort that you reduce, by providing a technology or a process, think about the time you're saving to the business, right? The CRO would always want to, close deals faster. How do you attribute to that, right? CFO would always want to be more compliant, for the public company or going public. How do you kind of tie it back to that? And those are not rocket science stuff, but so often departments, and again, not just legal, like so focused on their own island. And legal specifically is not an island. It's a crossroad. It's in the middle of everything else. So in a way, it's can
hub of the
be
smokes.
yeah, can be a
Mhm.
leverage to so many parts of the business. And I do think it is part of legal ops work and job to be able to illustrate that to the rest of the company, or by very minimum to the rest of the operation teams in the company, as they kind of think about those projects.
Perfect. I got an excellent follow up on that, right? So look at the how to achieve full process adoption, right? That's a bold statement, right? Like both for legal and the business. Like, is that even achievable? I would love to hear from both of you on this one, from your perspectives.
I think we had
Stumped, I was
we had
stumped.
this conversation. So I think for certain initiatives, maybe getting full process may be more attainable, but across the legal department, I don't think so. And here's why. There are certain things that you can automate because there's value in automating. There's a good substantive ROI or impact, or the level of effort is less. There's some events that are just not necessarily warrant some automation today. Over time, of course, but that when we say something is coming, it's on the roadmap, it's over time, that means it's low priority. It's not going to get done in the near future, right? And so there's certain events that I know, like we have a list of a lot of low priority items. Realistically, it's probably never going to get done. Some of those things may fall off. Some new things may get added onto it. There's just no value. So are we going to get full automation out of that as a department? Probably not. But when it comes to specific applications or specific initiatives, can we get close to full adoption? 100%, I think so. But there are factors that govern that too, right? One is if people don't have a choice and this is the only way you can operate, you'll get a higher adoption rate, right? So, for example, I'll use CLM as an example, right? If the only way to submit a contract is through a CLM, you will get a higher change. You may get a very high, if not full adoption, because there's no other way to get a contract initiated or signed, right? If you have tone from the top and that this is the way we want to do things, you'll get higher, almost full adoption. So I think it varies situation to situation, but full adoption across the department, probably unlikely.
Yeah, I think no, I think it's I actually like that word because it it kind of creates an uneasy feeling of can that even be possible? I would answer in two ways. One, I agree with you that it's one of the things that you maybe want to strive for in areas, but sort of like from expectations perspective, to think that would be possible, maybe at all, or definitely from likely is probably the wrong way to look at it. But you are able to actually think about it slightly different if you split it between adoption of automation and process or adoption of policy, right? And so I think when you think about what is even worth automating or what is even worth digitalizing, I think just running around creating a list of all the things you see and say, oh, I want to automate this and this and this and this, that makes no sense, right? It's just like you need to understand that those things do cost time and effort, right? And so that's an investment thing. With AI and other things, the cost might go down, right? Or not might, it will go down, right? So, but that might open up projects that in the past you would say, that's not worth it. But now it is worth it because it's much easier. But I think when it does come to policy, I think you want to get to a point where, like you said, all contracts are being reviewed in a certain way, or, from a compliance perspective, right, that certain controls are being held, at the 100% or as close to 100% as possible, right? Again, I'm not a lawyer, but that is like as much as possible to be able to adhere to it. So so I do like the idea of how do you strive for that, right, versus how do you achieve it almost, right? So like how do you strive to achieve full process adoption in a way might be a better way to frame it. Just like the pursuit of happiness, right? Whether it's possible or not, that's a very philosophical question. So instead of saying let's be all happy, let's at least have all the opportunity to pursue happiness.
So next question: How does user experience play into this conversation, both in the business function and legal department?
I can take this first, and then Rajan, I'm interested to hear kind of how you see it in practice. We in Tonkean in general, but me personally, always believe that there's a direct correlation between compliance and efficiency to adoption and then to experience. And again, coming from the technology and like the product concept, right? If you go to a website that asks you to fill in 20 fields to sign up versus one that would ask you for like one field, what is the conversion rate going to be? You don't have to be in marketing or in product like to know that the conversion rate is just going to be unparalleled. Still, most contract forms or legal request forms have dozens of fields and dozens of information that maybe already exists somewhere else. Maybe already you might be already kind of assume it or like reduct it. If you're asking for this thing, you might not need that type of information. optimizing the experience in the sense of what is the, you know, the least friction you can get to achieve a certain goal. That to me is a good experience. When it comes to processes, what is that impact on adoption? I think we have plenty of data, on other, areas of business and technology, that this is the biggest lever, right, for adoption. And then what does adoption means for compliance and efficiency? Well, I think if you build a very strong policy or process, or you implement a beautiful system, whatever it is, e-billing to CLM to anything in between, but no one using it, then obviously you're going to get zero compliance and zero efficiency, because everyone are still going to do it in the old ways, right? So adoption is key there. So anyway, this is sort of like almost like conceptually is how I think about those things together. I guess, for you, Rajan, I would be curious, like, where do you think it falls flat the most, on projects, or when it's like mostly successful?
Right. So for those that have worked with me, I have a very simple philosophy. It's called the triple S, right? And I use it frequently. It has to solve the problem, right? If I want to have experience, it has to solve my problem, right? Two, I should be able to. It has to be simple, and I make this akin to any of the fintech apps we use, whether you use Venmo, Zelle, it's very simple. So simple that you don't even need training, it's just so intuitive,
Yep.
right? So it has to be, we should be striving for that. It should be simple, intuitive. And my third S is I should be able to search for information. Whatever I enter, I should be able to search. If I can search it, my experience is going to won't be rewarding. So that's generally that's the three triple S philosophy I use in all my things. So when we're looking at complex applications, even if you take it screen by screen, right? One is it solving my problem? Is it intuitive? Can I find this information? And that's the baseline of what I use when I'm looking at user experience. Right now, I've been in a situation where we've had engineering teams build out applications. They have the silver bullet. They have all these nice things, and we've shown it to an attorney. Said, "Look, you can do this. It may have some AI. It has this. It has this." And the attorney, the first question they have is, "Why is the labels camel case, or why is the button red?" And forget the jazzy, all the glory, all the bells and whistles. That's what they're focused on, right? Is why is this, or what do you mean by this label? What does this label mean, right? This is how the department works. And so I give my engineers an example. I said, if you can have someone that has no background understand how to use this application, there's a very strong case will have a good or generally better adoption. Right. So that's just how I think of things. A little different. I'm sure it's a little funny.
No, it's actually exactly. I agree completely. Right. This is that is a beautiful way to. I like the triple S. This really is. The simple is essentially. Does it solve your problem? This is essentially the ROI point, right?
Right.
Is it simple? Is it really what is? I think what everyone agrees is the best experience is the experience it's simple and you don't need to learn it, right? So I 100% agree with you. And I was just laughing because there was the example you gave with the labels is, it's so true. It's amazing. It's amazing. At the end of the day, you're like, why is it red? Can it not be red? Can we make this stuff something else? Kind of thing. I do think it actually brings in an interesting point of we do have AI in that title of this thing, so might be a good point to kind of bring some of that in here. I do think that one thing we're seeing this year with AI and a large language models specifically, but also in the last half a decade with no code and like some of the areas that brought is the ability to personalize the experience a lot more. Personalizes to the company, but also personalized to the individual that goes through a process. And I think that when you look earlier this year on some of the ChatGPT demos and all that stuff, I think what blows people mind the most was not even that that it was able to generate like songs that sounds like Eminem. To me, is that it was one place where you start from and can really kind of take you on an adventure. Depends on whatever you kind of like ask it and go and reply back and sort of like, tell me about the Roman Empire, and then write an Eminem song about what you just told me. You know what I mean? Like the level of choose your own adventure is so counter to what we got used to in the last couple decades with SaaS and everything, where it's just like predefined screens that kind of like force you to mold into the screen, and all of a sudden here's the technology is the opposite. It's like, go wild, whatever you want. It will kind of like react to your whims and desires. So I think obviously that's too much too open ended, and kind of like it's cool as a demo. And there's use cases where it's very useful, but I think going back to kind of the topic of legal and processes, I do think there's stuff we can learn from it as we kind of think about adoption and what personalization can mean to it, right? And something we talk a lot about is, you really want people to go through a form sequence really when they ask for something complex, but do they have to come from the portal? Maybe they're used to sending emails to legal@company.com. Everyone hates that, but not the requester. The requester actually loves it. It's much easier to remember, like searchable, to your point. I'm just sending an email to legal, at company.com. What if, you can use those LLMs and other stuff to let them do that, extract whatever you can, pre-fill the form, and just say, hey, I did 80% of the job for you. Can you just review this and, and click submit? Right. So you met them where they are, but you also kind of personalize it by like already. So like skip steps that you don't, right? This is just example, but I think, I think there's a lot more tools these days to teams like yourself to fulfill that triple S in every aspect, much more than there were, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and definitely before that.
That's his new wrestling name, Triple S. I'm not going to let that down, Raj. So, got excellent discussion so far. So, I'm going to close out this discussion point on the goal of legal ops with a final question. Like, why now? Why is it the time to be thinking about improving legal processes to be more effective and efficient?
So I can take that. So, given the market conditions, the market macroeconomics, right? There's so much more pressure on costs containment and all, right? And legal ops is actually in a very good spot right now, and our role is becoming even more paramount and critical because we're actually a bridge between business partners and legal as well, right? Anything today that a business, legal touches almost everything that involves a business today, whether it comes from contracts, whether it comes from privacy, whether it comes from launching of new products, where there's regulation that we need to be aware of and need to adhere to, right? Legal is involved in almost every single business function today, right? And so it becomes even more imperative as to how legal ops can help legal transition from being just a service provider to more of a business strategic partner, right? We're not only providing services, but we're actually engaged in how we drive strategy that we can mitigate risk or we can comply with various regulations and all. And the function of that is actually falling more and more on legal operations because attorneys are not the best. Marketing is not their best forte, right? And so how do we as legal operations connect the dots between the business function and legal, and where do we bring in legal appropriately as well? But in order to do that, we also have to educate the business as to what is the value of legal and why is it so strategic in what they do. So what happens if a product launches and and we are now not in compliance with the various regulations related to the product? What would happen? Now, if you brought in legal much earlier in the process, here's how we could mitigate risk. So there's a lot of education that needs to be spent educating engineers why it's important. Privacy 5 years ago was something that was new, relatively new, and it required a lot of effort. Today, everybody understands it, and everybody realizes we need legal upfront because of this privacy. Make sure that we are privacy compliant. So I think today legal operations function is so much more critical from a strategic player, then two from a process and technology player. Now, in my role right now, I'm looking at technology, but I'm looking at what do we have in-house that we can leverage so that we can utilize the economies of scale to fulfill our needs together. It may not be the most ideal solution, but it'll get me at least 80% or 60% up there, right? Today. And then when things over time, if we do identify opportunities where we do really need something that is more specific, we can always shop for that. But at least it gets me to a situation where we can do a much more reasonable assessment of what we need. So I think looking at that with that lens is becoming more critical for legal operations function today. Yeah.
Yeah, I would make it short. I agree. Like I think it's almost a perfect storm from a timing perspective. Of we think about legal ops in general. It is like you said, both managing risk and help the legal team control it, but then at the same time creating leverage and efficiency. So it's when you think about the situation right now, both on like a financial, the economy, and the paradigm shift that happened for a lot of companies in money is not cheap anymore, and and now kind of going back to certain priorities that are different in the last 5+ years, and then at the same time the innovation around technology that enables you to do things has also a risk associated. There's a leverage with it, but also a risk, right? If now an engineer you just mentioned is trying to use like AI to help code faster, but then using like code that is not approved from a privacy perspective, from like um, it's not the licenses of it is not open source, but it's actually so commercial required. The AI used it. I don't know if you guys read about that situation that happened in the past, where the AI was trained on code that is not actually open source, and so people just use it, but then they're like open for legal risk with using code that they're not supposed to, but they don't even know. So like the landscape is changing too. So you kind of like need to be able to now look at areas where maybe you had zero risk before. So like both from like a good place and a risky place, it's a very specific moment that you want to get ahead of it. And it's not even ahead of it, years ahead of it. It's like months ahead of it, before it like, bite you back.
Okay, guys, we're going to move on to discussion point 2. Excellent discussion so far. Technology and getting started. When legal is ready to get started, leveraging innovative technology to improve and drive their processes, how do you choose where to start? Let's go to
I'm a big fan of process first, personally. So before I even look at technology, I want to understand the process. And usually, often the case I hear is, we've got the process, we need a tool. And I'm like, no. I need to understand the process just so I can recommend a best tool. And you'll be surprised as you go through the process, you will find opportunities where, you could optimize the process, right? Regardless of whether you need the tool or not, just the process in itself, you can actually find opportunities there. Then we then have a discussion about with technology. So I'm usually, if someone is already walking me through a solution, I stop and I'm like, what is the problem we're solving for? And why is it a problem today? Right. And that's my first, before I even have discussions with technology. But yeah, that's just me.
I agree. I think in the cycle of like people, processes, technology, I agree with you. Technology is the third one. So I would just add to what you said about the process. I would also look at the people, right? Who are the stakeholders? What do they care about? Why are they in this process? Should they even be in this process? Sometimes it's better to just delete a part than try to improve it. Maybe those people don't even need to be in that. Maybe that step needs to be removed. Don't buy another software to do this step. Maybe that step is completely irrelevant anymore.
Perfect. We got some great questions coming in from both Seth and Danielle. We'll address those in a little bit, but we're going to do a bit of rapid fire here, so we can push through the questions. How do you identify what to automate? Either one of you can take that one.
Sorry, one more time. Colin, sorry, you broke up. One more time.
How do you identify what to automate?
Oh, what to automate? Oh, I look at a couple of things. Level of effort, right? If it's going to take a large level of effort, it better have a high impact, right? So, because today I'm looking at my investment, where can I get quicker wins with the least level of effort? So, level of effort, we talk about ROI. What's the return on investment that equates to impact? I look at that. I look at how mature is the process today, and is it going to be an incremental change, or is it actually going to be a significant change? Right. I look at that, and I look at the risk. Right. How is the risk significant, or is it insignificant? So these are some of the levers I use in assessing what to automate and what not to automate. In addition to who's screaming at you the loudest. That sometimes does tend to influence the decision, unfortunately.
How do you determine where and under what conditions to employ AI?
I can maybe take a first stab on it, and you can add. I think the first thing that is almost like a myth about AI is the same thing that has happened with automation, the same thing that happened with mobile. And I come back to mobile because it's the easiest to. At one point, there was a mobile app for anything, and then thankfully we graduated from that state as a society and understand that not everything should be on mobile. Like cramping all of this information into a mobile device, maybe you want to sign, maybe you want to review on mobile, but do you really want to edit like complex presentations in mobile? Probably not, right? And so the ability to understand that mobile technology is a tool, is a type of technology that serves a certain purpose, is very important. I think we experience the same. We experience the same thing with automation, where it's like everything should be automated. Everything should. 1 second, Similarly happening with AI now. It's like, oh, AI will take over everything. I don't know. I'm talking with you right now with a computer, right? Not with mobile device. So it's again, it's the same idea. So I think, yeah, AI would be more common than I think most people understand. I think it's already ingrained in so many things, and it's just very trendy right now. But like, because again, the large language models really kind of changed the way for people to experience AI. But the AI and machine learning is been here for a bit, right? And it's been ingrained in everything we do already. I think the biggest thing to answer your question on a tactical level of like where should you use AI right now, I would say either where I would actually, if I need to choose one place, is where you want a human level communication with a low risk of mistake. Okay, so if you don't, I wouldn't suggest using AI just yet to now like go and like, I don't know, like do preparing for court notes, kind of thing. That's just too risky. The risk of mistake is too high. But answering questions out of on a knowledge base, or trying to identify, that's a better one, trying to identify risk and an urgency out of a request or a contract, just in a way to triage it better for the team. The person still needs the one to sign off on it. You're just trying to help that person with getting it faster. That is a great example of low risk, but potentially high reward. And I think that I came up with it, like Microsoft call it co-pilot, right? I think that is the kind of like the way to think about it, is that not like an autonomous pilot just yet, but as a co-pilot, as as an AI assist type of thing.
That could be achieved by like prompt engineering, right? Where you create certain prompts.
Absolutely. No, it can be achieved already today, and there's plenty of ways to inject it into your process. But I really think there's the risk with ChatGPT as a whole that people take it and copy paste it versus like kind of like understanding that what it is trying to assist you. So I do think that both from tooling and, like you said, process and policies, you can help people not make those mistakes. But yeah.
So
Okay.
I think AI capabilities is immense and unfathomable. We've barely scratched the surface, right? At work, I call AI assisted intelligence. I don't even say artificial. I just call it assisted intelligence because I think there's a lot of opportunity to use it to create a draft of whatever you want to do with it, right? There's situations where if you want to create a draft for a case summary, it's a perfect way to create a draft. I wouldn't believe in it completely, but I would use it as a draft to start off. And it saves hours there because it saves the attorney from having to read a lot of information. They can use it to create a draft and use that draft to sort of drive tactical decisions, right? So I see opportunities there. I think there's so much we can do with it. I mean, the technology is moving very fast. We're seeing a lot of it in the most obvious cases, contracts, whether it's in the drafting, the post signature, we are looking for certain indemnification types or certain regulations. Very useful there. I see it crossing beyond that into like litigation, into e-discovery, where when you're dealing with large sets of data and you want to know a little bit more insights about the data, a great way to interact and to get an idea of what the data set looks like. But again, I'm not sure I would totally believe in what I would be totally believe in the results that is returned, but I would use that as a guiding stepstone to what I need to do next.
So,
Yeah, I
guys,
think by the way it connects nicely. Chris, on the chat mentioned AI can make predictions and identify partners, and in ways that that basic technology and human intervention cannot. And I think Chris is right, and I think you're right too, Rajan. And I think this is where, to your point of like you would use it as a draft, or I think when you think about making prediction and patterns, you use it as a
Mm-hmm.
signal, right? You would, and I think this is another thing that um, we haven't adopted yet, as in general in this area where it's more of like that proactive aspect of AI. That some in financials they use it all the time in in trading, and there's a lot more areas where you can bring that idea that AI look at the big data, look at the history of things, and try to predict and try to identify patterns, but then surface them for us to kind of like as part of our us humans. I mean, as part of our workflow and and how we want to leverage it. Similar to your point about the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
so I'm just cognizant of time, and I want to get these questions out. So we're going to do rapid fire for 4 more for discussion point 2. So, Rajan, how do you measure impact internally on technology?
Oh, so I look at it as my primary focus would be adoption.
Okay. What does it look like to start small and build a catalog of use cases? This could go to both of you or anybody.
Can you repeat?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it look like to start small and build a catalog of use cases for your workflows?
Yeah, I think
George,
it's that agile approach we've talked about earlier in this, right? It's just like, what is the low hanging fruit, low effort, medium to high impact, like the report that Rajan described, or sit on an email inbox, or like what are the areas where not a minimum change, but there's value coming out of it
right,
immediately, and then you start building on it, and you add more complexity to it,
right,
and before you know it, you now have a complete new way of doing this.
right. And just to add to that is the way I look at it is high volume, low risk, or low volume, high risk, right? And I target those first, and anything in between, take it case by case.
Mhm.
I think that's where you see true benefits of automation there.
What does it look like to bring people along with you?
Extremely critical. If you don't have them along the way and in all throughout the process, not towards the end, not in the beginning, but hand holding them throughout the process, super, super important.
Can you both give an example of like when you've seen like a legal process improve within a company and what
When we
impact it had?
when you've seen a legal process in the company make an impact? Is that the question? Sorry, Colin, you broke up.
Yeah. So when you've seen, like, how it improved, your adjusted legal process in a company, how, like, what impact it made, if you could give like a use case.
Siggy, do you want to talk? I mean, that's right up in your space.
Well, I have a lot of them, but I think it's a simple one that I think everyone have a version of, and the impact of it can be very, very, very immediate. Is wrapping around your intake of legal requests. I think there's versions of it, right? You can say like, take care of like automating or like handling a certain type of intake, right? I don't know, like a conflict waiver request or contract request or whatever. You can think about it from like, creating like an entry point that then direct you to the relevant areas, or you can go all the way down to like, okay, how do I now walk you through that form by, question by question to kind of like auto handle certain things. But all in all, Colin, I think the amount of companies I've worked with and talked to, legal teams in companies that don't actually even know what request comes in, how many, and who's handling them, was actually shocking. So I think sometimes the simple thing of taking a stab at it and creating creating a layer on top of your email inbox, maybe a entry point for employees to kind of go about their intake. It's a very low effort, especially if you connect to existing channels. But the result are immediate. You immediately can see what's going on. You can have visibility to it. You can understand where the opportunities are, and then start automating from there. Kind of going back to our previous point of iterating.
Perfect. I'm going to take one of the questions in the chat from Seth to start with. And it says, what do you think the legal landscape will look like in, say, 5 years as technology becomes more commoditized and more people have a clearer and less charged understanding of its advantages and limitations?
This is a very interesting question. I've been thinking about this too. I think we're going to see a lot more, AI capabilities for sure, right? We're starting to see that. We're going to see a lot more things that used to take longer to process or that required a lot of manual hours. You'll see that shrink over time. I also think the way we look at data, the way we report on data, the way data is rendered will also change. So some of the reporting tools we're looking at today will evolve because AI capabilities will help, or Gen AI will help drive this information, make it so informative that the way we look at this information or how it's reported will change as well. So I think reporting engines will change. I think that all these some of these collections of data will change, where it'll be more interactive, it'll be more precise, right? We'll be able to reduce the hours we spend doing this and spend those hours on other things that may evolve and increase time as well. What that is, I'm not sure yet, but I do anticipate there will be certain things we will see an increase in time because of having leveraged some technologies down upstream or downstream as well.
Yep.
Sergey, from your perspective, this is also something.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. If I would do the strawman on the other side of it, I think there's a lot of things that will not change either, right?
That's true. That is true.
I think we'll continue to, at the end of the day, it is, every processes and business in general is about people. At the end of the day, this is we do people working with people. And so I think a lot of that work you mentioned that would then not be anything we're doing anymore, would be replaced with something better. I hope, right? But the fundamentals of a lot of the things we talked about today, I don't think are going to change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I dare to say ever, but
Mm-hmm.
At least in my current understanding of the world, not in any near future. And again, not from a bad perspective necessarily, right? This is just how people communicate and how we work. So I think there's a massive opportunity to change a lot of things or remove processes that we shouldn't have ever had, kind of thing in retrospect. there's going to be a lot of type of tasks that people are doing right now that I've got so used to do, but it really is mind numbing and not like something that they should be doing. But I think it's also scary for a lot of people sometimes because they get, comfortable in that. And so that friction of like, pushing, I have young kids, right? Like pushing people out of their comfort zone to be better for themselves, for their own sake, it is a friction that I think will lag the technology innovation that will enable it, if that makes sense. So I think it's an interesting cycle.
So yes, I sometimes wonder, we're in a webinar today, right? With all these people looking at us, will this survive in the next few years? Because you could have the same interaction with a Gen AI video enabled
Yeah,
system
I think
out
it's a
there.
good question. I think the question is why people are listening to this webinar, right? If they're looking for facts, that's not the place to find it, right? But if they're looking for opinions or like thoughts, then I don't know if Gen AI would provide the same level of entertainment. And that's the other thing, right? I don't know if you heard this. There's a saying that says the most likely scenario is the most entertaining one.
Anyone.
And I think I love it because it does come back to the fact this entire world is sort of like our we live in our own bubble of people with people. Everything we do is really the interaction with other people, and so the likely scenario is the most entertaining one because in a way we're kind of building the narrative on the fly whether we mean for it or not. And if it's entertaining, then it's most likely to survive. It's just an interesting way to think about it.
Yep.
So one question on the future to jump into, if you had your moonshot on what the legal ops landscape would look like in the future, what would it be? Rajan first.
No legal ops. I think the legal ops function will change. It's going to change. It'll have to change, right?
Tell me why. Why does it have to change?
Because I think as you see the advent of some of these technologies, I think even the focus of legal, you look at the people graduating out of law school and all, they're all coming out with some background in technology. They've grown up with it. It's become ubiquitous, right? And so as legal ops, the conversations with legal folks will be more about sophisticated technology, or how do we do things that we can, with the assumption that we are going to use technology, right? Or we're going to use some sort of technology capabilities in there. So the conversations will change as to here's why technology is useful, to which technology can I use to solve this problem, right? So I think that'll change, right? And then how do I know that this is the best technology to use, and what are the safeguards and guardrails around it? So I think that whole legal ops function will evolve.
Yeah, I agree. I would say if I need to choose one sentence about it, is the move from legal operators to legal architects. And kind of think about how the role and what that means to architect something versus to operate something. And I think that's this is where I don't know if it will take 5 years or it will take 15, but I think that's sort of the path, the inevitable path, and it's a positive one, right? And I think in general, that would be true for a lot of roles, but definitely for operation roles.
Absolutely. I mean, we're sort of seeing it with citizen developers, right? The concept of citizen developers, right? Especially in the automation space. There's an assumption that anybody in legal operators joining has some technology or some way of looking at problems in a logical way, right?
Yep.
There's that assumption that's inherent now. So I think it'll happen much sooner.
Yeah. So I want to be mindful, lads. We're top of the hour, and I wanted to give Siggy the last word, on key takeaways from our discussion.
No, I appreciate it. No, this is great discussion. Said that KB couldn't join, but it's great points. I think as a whole, this is where we like to help companies with, is kind of figuring out where everything comes together, and we see ourselves as sort of the orchestration layer for a lot of, or the operating system sometimes even for those operation teams. And even if you stack start with something as simple but mighty as fixing your intake. You can go a lot further with all these areas that you want to automate and leverage technology for, but really so like build solutions that are built for the people that are in your company, not only in the department, right? Different stakeholders and the business, your customers' business, and yeah, and really enjoyed the conversation, and I think there's a lot of really good tidbits and tips and tricks. So hopefully it was useful for the listeners as well.
Awesome. No, it was a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, guys. Attendees, thank you for hanging on past the hour. I appreciate you spending your time with us. It's much appreciated, and thank you so much. Look forward to our next one. The Tonkean team will be following up with a copy of the recording, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.